Hey all, FilthyRobot here, doing another Darkest Dungeon 2 Early Access deep dive, this time talking about the Leper. I know I have quite a reputation for hating the Leper from Darkest Dungeon 1, and to be fair, the Darkest Dungeon 1 Leper was absolute garbage. The Darkest Dungeon 2 Leper, maybe a little bit different. Let's talk through it. Alright, so as always, going to start with the stats and skills, then move on to the specialties of the class, and then talk about summarizing what I think about the class as a whole. The Leper is pretty unique in this game. The Hellion and the Leper are the only two classes that have this condition effect that is inherent to the class. You can generate these condition effects through items in general or in buffs, but these are the only two classes that have them inherently as part of the class. So the Leper at the combat start has a chance to double blind, a 50% chance to get a blind, and a 25% chance to get another blind. So you can start with anywhere between 0 and 2 blind stacks on your character. Blind is minus 50% chance to hit is what it gives you for one attack per blind, essentially. All right, the Leper comes in at 59 HP, which is the largest HP pool of any of the characters in the game currently, and 2 speed, which is the slowest of all the characters in the game, tied with the Man-at-Arms. Has a really interesting resist profile. Talk more about that in a second, why it's interesting, but here they are. 10 bleed, 10 blight, 20 burn. Those are all well below average. Average is 30 for each of those. So very susceptible to bleeds, very susceptible to blights, fairly susceptible to burns. A little bit extra stun resist. I think the average is 20, 30 move resist instead of 20, 20 debuff resist is on average again, and 30 disease resist is average. So these resistance stats are very bad, as in everything is going to hit the Leper that targets it by and large. Let's work through the skills, starting with Chop. This is the basic auto attack, quote unquote, of the Leper. Pretty high base damage at 6 to 12, upgrades to 6 to 16. The upgrade is not super exciting since it is upgrading max damage as opposed to min damage, although it is the largest upgrade in damage outside of some specialty skills like Finale or Point Blank. For generic skills that just don't have situational modifiers, this is plus 2 average damage. The other high-end ones are like plus 1.5 average damage, so it is a little bit higher upgrade on damage here. However, Chop comes with a pretty high cost, and that is every time you chop, you apply at rank 1, 75% chance, and at mastery level, at the mastery level version of this, 60% chance to blind yourself after attacking. The upgraded version can utilize combo. If you're already blinded and you attack a target that has a combo stack, you will ignore your blind for that attack to guarantee that hit. But by and large, you're not going to be able to use this ability again and again and again because the Leper will start blinded and will continue to blind himself every time he basically attacks with this ability. All right, moving on. Purge. This ability hasn't done a lot for me. There's quite a few ways to get rid of corpses at the moment, and the Leper seems to have better things to do than this most of the time from my perspective, but it's okay. It does apply a combo, and combo generation is fairly valuable. There's a number of payoffs. The best payoffs for me thus far have been, there's a couple of damage enablers, there's some crit enablers, and then there's some stun enablers that all come out of combos. Those tend to be my preferred payoffs for combos, but there's all sorts of ways to utilize combo. So generating combo is not worthless. It's less exciting to only be able to target a single character to generate the combo, so the Leper is only ever going to be able to apply the combo to that front rank. So not super keen on this ability. Don't really want to spend the points upgrading it. Super not flexible. The Leper really isn't a damage dealer in this game. So I'm not super motivated, or incentivized is probably the way to put that. I'm not super incentivized to bother trying to get a target to where the Leper can hit it, because the Leper really doesn't need to be hitting things to be good in this game. So I don't really like the skill, don't really do much with it, but there are situations where you might want to clear corpses, and if your team is not very good at hitting the back ranks, this may become important. And as we figure out more unlocks for which enemies are particularly vulnerable to being bumped to the back ranks, this might become more and more useful. All right, moving on. Withstand. This is another one of the stance abilities. I really like stance abilities. They're a new thing added to the Darkest Dungeon skill set. These work, they apply generally an upfront pretty significant buff, and then like a lingering buff that does a thing each turn. So in this case, we get a bunch of resists. The resists are annoyingly here. I don't really love this ability. I don't use Withstand very often, and although I do like the bleed, blight, and burn resist, the Leper has such low stats that this rarely seems to change that much of an application. It does to some degree. Self guard and taunt are both, or excuse me, self block and taunt are both pretty valuable, and this generates block per turn. Now, two problems with this. One, there's another taunt ability on the Leper that I prefer to this ability. Two, I don't actually value blight, bleed, or burn resist very highly on the Leper, and I'll get into more of that in a little bit. And three, the upgraded version of this does not apply tier 2 block. Just to it gives you tier 2 block on application, but each subsequent turn only gives you tier 1 block. Now that's okay to some degree because those effects are unique effects, so they don't stack. They don't remove a stack of each, but you can have both of them on you, kind of deal. However, I don't like this ability. I don't find that the way it works with the Leper is the Leper so rarely can do things that are impactful that I don't want to spend an action doing this. There are already so many other things the Leper needs to be doing regularly to make this useful. So I don't value this, and in part because it doesn't give me disease debuff, disease resist, which I find super important on the Leper, and it doesn't give me debuff resist, which allows you to, for example, resist blind, which is super important on the Leper. So basically, the stats that it gives me, I don't feel like I have enough of those stats to still be super impactful for spending the turn for this. It's a lot of things, and the taunt is the most valuable portion of this, but there's a different, more efficient way to get taunt, in my opinion, for this character. So although this initially reads really well, and I was initially quite excited about this, upon using this a bunch, I was just like, I rarely want to bother with this. And more on that in a minute. All right, next up is Solemnity. This ability is absolutely incredible. So Leper comes in with huge HP, and it's pretty easy to get HP stacking items across the course of a game. And the upgraded version of this heal, so first of all, you have to be below 33% health to use this. You only get 2 per fight. There's no cooldown on when you can use it. And that's not even true. So let me rephrase that slightly. If you want the heal, you have to be below 33%, but you can use this whenever. So if you're not at below 33% health, you can still utilize this, and it just will give you the stress healing portion of it. And it's a big stress heal. It starts as 2, and the upgraded version is 3. And the heal is really big too, because it's percent-based healing on a character that has a lot of HP. And a 50% HP heal on this character is a huge heal, especially if you're stacking HP on this character. So I think this skill is the bread and butter skill for the Leper. During regular trash fights, it's essentially stress maintenance. It's very easy to utilize this to remove 2 or 3 stacks of stress out of nowhere, so you never generate high stress. And on the dangerous fights, this is like a 40-point heal. I mean, not with this HP, but if you're stacking HP on this, I often get Lepers at 80 to 83 HP, and this becomes a 40-point heal, which is huge. It's an absolutely massive heal. And with low resist, this is one of the few characters where I'm not that upset in general if I have a dot on this character, because the character has such high HP that a lot of times a dot just enables me to actually use this ability, which is so strong. And again, almost all the healing in this game is percent-based, so having huge HP is a lot more exciting in this game than it was in the last game, where almost all the healing was amount-based as opposed to percent-based. So you get a lot more return on your healing with a character with a lot of HP. So this for me has just been super fun. This is like class defining for the Leper. It makes the Leper into this unkillable tank, which is quite fun. All right, moving on. Reflection. So this ability, this is your enabler, and it does a couple different things. First of all, it removes any and all stacks of blind on you. It removes combo from you, which happens a fair amount. The Leper often has taunt, often gets attack, so often has combo. It stress heals, which is a bit counterfeit by the fact that this ability already does so much stress healing that you rarely need to bother with this ability. But this ability has no use stack and has no cooldown, so you can spam this ability if you want to stress heal if you have some reason to. And the upgraded version does something kind of cool, which is it gives you debuff resist. So not only do you remove the blind stacks on you, but you have a chance, not a very good chance, starting at 6, with the upgraded version and base stats, you're at a 60% chance to still get blinded. It's only a 40% chance to resist it. But that means if you do decide to use chop, you sometimes resist the blinds you apply to yourself anyways, which is kind of cool. Now, I don't really like this ability that much. It's okay. I do tend to have it on my bar because sometimes I'll start a fight with 2 stacks of blind or like some debuff, etc., and it's useful enough to use then. But by and large, I have different ways to get rid of blind that are more action efficient than this, and I don't need this for stress healing, and I'm not regularly trying to swing with the Leper, so I don't need the debuff resist, and I just find I don't use this ability very much. I think this ability makes this ability nearly useless. But we'll see. Maybe there's some good damaging builds in the Leper that work that I haven't seen yet. That might be it. All right, moving on. Hue. So Hue is the front rank AoE attack of the Leper. It has the same debuffs as Chop. The damage is a little less exciting, although since it's hitting twice, it's actually slightly more total damage. It's still just a little bit less exciting to do medium levels of damage to 2 targets as opposed to high damage to 1 target, just the way that removing a character from the field works. It's harder to utilize the combo payoff, which is you ignore blind if you're attacking targets that are comboed, because you require 2 targets for that to be perfect here. And you just don't generate enough combo points to find that targets have tons of combo all over them. Combo also weirdly doesn't stack. So if you apply combo to a target that already has combo, you don't get 2 stacks of combo, which is kind of weird. Anyway, so I don't really like this ability very much. I played around with it a little bit. I thought maybe it'd be good in boss fights or something like that, but it hasn't really performed for me at all. I tend not to use it past checking it out a couple times. Maybe you guys have some better experiences with it, but it really does not a lot for me. Moving on, Revenge. This is an interesting ability, i.e. So I think the current Act 1 is a little bit punishing for Leper damage builds. And I think that's because the Act 1 boss, some spoilers here, if you don't want to have the Act 1 boss spoiled for you, take a second, mute the mic or mute the stream. The Act 1 boss applies a lock to your skills, and that lock is fairly unpredictable when it occurs. And the Leper basically needs the stars to align to actually get an attack off, especially when you're looking at abilities like Revenge and then later on Rune, which we'll talk about in a minute. So these are ways that make your rare attacks more powerful. And the Act 1 boss kind of shuts all that down, really, because when you do get those stars aligned, some of the time you can't use your ability anyways, kind of deal. But what this ability does is it applies 2 stacks of Vone, 1 stack an upgrade to yourself, and gives you a recurring buff of plus 50% damage each turn that will stack up to 3 times, so you don't waste it by not using it immediately. And the upgraded version removes weakness, as well as gives you a small percent chance, 15% chance of turn start of applying crit. What I've found is that this is rarely relevant. I don't attack very often with the Leper. I'm almost always doing other support abilities, and I'll show you the one that I mostly spam with the Leper, which is Intimidate. And so when I do attack, I'm often attacking with a low damage ability where I don't want to spend resources to get a 50% damage buff that isn't affecting a 6 to 12 ability, but is instead affecting a 1 to 2 ability. So my experience with this is that I haven't found the situation where this is perfect. Now, what it looks like there probably is in here that is there's probably a build I just haven't messed around with the Leper. There's probably some sort of like enabler build where it's like a dedicated trying to make the Leper do big numbers hits consistently, where there's some ability to remove blind repeatedly. Maybe if I get some like really big debuff resist item that I could equip, or a perk that gives me a bunch of debuff resist. And Darkest Dungeon 2 does a really interesting thing with their perks. Their perks are much more powerful, especially the positive perks, in the sense that you can build around the perks that you get occasionally. So there might be some build arounds that eventually let me do something different with the Leper, which I think is great game design, because it means each individual run is going to be different, potentially based on the perks, which is going to be super cool. But anyways, all right, so I haven't found a whole lot of use for this, but I can imagine a scenario where there's some use for this. And that scenario is a scenario where the Leper is going to be able to swing each turn with their primary damaging abilities like Chop or Hue. Now, that hasn't arisen for me yet, but it might. All right. This is what I consider the bread and butter attack for the Leper. It does a lot of really powerful things. The Leper wants to be hit because the Leper is the most efficient healer in the game, but only a self-healer. Now we've finally added something in this game that makes self-healing relevant, and that is taunt. So this applies 2 stacks of taunt to the Leper, applies 2 stacks of weakness to a target, which is a 50% damage malice. So it's a really nice debuff because it can't be, unlike blind, which sometimes is just ignored, 50% of the time it does nothing. This always has an impact, and the impact's quite a large impact. And there's a number of enemies in this game that hit very hard, so debuffing them is valuable. And this also removes either a stack of dodge from the opponent or a stack of block from the opponent because it's an attack on them, and it removes blind from you. So worst case scenario, It's like remove a stack of blind from the Leper, gain 2 taunt on a character who wants that. It can hit any target, so you can use it to death door check, and you can use it to remove buffs on any target because, yeah, you know, for imagine like take like the super efficient scenario where you are blinded, the target is evasive, has dodge buff on it, and the target's in some awkward position at like position 3 or something. You get taunt, you remove their buff, remove your debuff. It's just gravy. The upgrade really doesn't do anything for me. There isn't enough stealth situations where I care that much. The damage upgrade, although it's double, is only +1. So I don't really care about that, which makes it actually better for me because it means I don't have to waste mastery points on this to still get the value of this. But I use this ability all of the time because it just fits in with what the Leper is doing. The Leper is often blind, often isn't realistically going to be doing damage here, wants to be hit. And this does all of those things, generates taunt, removes debuffs, just so good. It's such a good ability. And you have to unlock it because before that, the Leper is kind of medium. It's like as a tank class, it doesn't really do enough kind of deal. But this is like the defining ability for the Leper, in my opinion. All right, Rune's another one of these ones where it sets up and like it's like 10 turns from now, the Leper is going to do a really big number. And you're like, great, that's very helpful. So what it does, it applies a buff to you that gives you stacking 20% damage. So it's first turn 20%, rather first damage 20%, second damage 40%, etc. This does stack up. And then the upgraded version of this applies a dot to yourself. I haven't resisted it yet, but I assume it can be resisted off of your bleed resist chance. I believe that all dots in this game base application chance is 100 minus the resist stat. So this probably starts at a 90% chance to apply to the Leper. And it's a stacking damage buff. The problem, of course, is you so rarely get to attack with the Leper, and when you do, you so rarely are using an attack that benefits from a % damage modifier that, again, this is going to be that build that I haven't really figured out how to do well, which is the big number Leper, regular attacker, probably supported by like, I don't know, probably a Jester and something else kind of deal, which just hasn't happened yet. So I haven't found this to be useful. I thought it might be useful versus bosses, tried it in the boss fights, and it still wasn't useful. So we'll see. We'll see where it gets enabled from. All right. Next up is Break. Break is like bad Chop. It has the same debuffs as Chop and Hue, which is self-blinding. It does remove block from the target, but so what? And it does less damage than Chop by quite a bit. It doesn't damage scale as well. I'm just not interested in this ability. I guess the upside of this is, I don't even know. I guess the upside is if you're regularly doing damage with your Leper, as a damage dealer in this fictional comp that enables the Leper to attack each round, you can now attack guarded targets without suffering damage malices. I guess. Probably. Maybe. All right. Next up, Bash. Another ability I quite like. This in Intimidate, the Leper has been one-dimensional, but quite fun in that one dimension for me. Again, I think there is a second build that could be built for the Leper, but the Leper for me tends to be a tank class that wants to take damage, is immune to stress, and has huge self-heals while throwing out taunt and sometimes debuffing with Intimidate. So this is another ability very similar to that, which is Intimidate gives you these effects. Even if you miss, you're getting the taunt, and often you're getting all the removal stuff while still getting the benefits out of it. And Bash is similar. Bash is a little bit more situational than Intimidate, but Daze is a nice situational debuff, knocking the opponent to the end of the round, especially with the Leper, because the Leper is so slow that oftentimes the Leper is last to act in a round, which means the Daze is particularly good because it means next round the opponent will be the very last to act in that full next round, and you'll have full actions to deal with that opponent before it gets any action. So it's much more like a stun in this situation than it would be. I like Immobilize. There's a couple of units that move things around. Again, I think there's some really neat things you can do with Immobilize. Things like making your dancing comps more efficient by the fact that that you remove rank 1 from even a potential spot to end up on, which means you get more activations of your positional, your skills that require positional setups to work. So I think Immobilize is a very valuable buff. And putting the upgraded version applying combo is super nice too. So what it tends to be then for me, the build that I mostly run with the Leper is Bash and Intimidate, Solemnity, and then like Chop. And I mean, you get 5 and you get some like flex skill that you want to do with that. And what I end up doing a lot of the time is if I'm heavily debuffed, I'll just Intimidate to get rid of my own blinds, and I can use it to remove positive status effects from the opponent. And if I'm not super heavily debuffed, but I don't want to blind myself, because both Intimidate and Bash can be used without self-blind, then what I'll do is I'll Bash for some value out of that. And then every so many turns, probably like once or twice a fight, I get to like throw in a random chop. And meanwhile, you're indestructible. Indestructible at like a heal for 40 on an 80 HP class that is immune to stress. I like current Leper. Current Leper seems like a lot of fun to me. It feels a little one-dimensional. Again, maybe we'll find that mythical Leper damage dealing comp. Certainly the skills seem like it's supposed to be there. But at the moment, what the Leper does well is become this unkillable, unmovable, immune to stress tank that just like survives everything. And that's actually a pretty useful role. Position 1-2 damage is really high in the early access. Position 3-4 is a lot lower, so situational matters. It's a very easy to apply taunt ability, so you get attacked a lot, and a huge payoff for getting attacked, which is the action economy of throwing out this incredible heal once or twice a fight, basically. I like this character. I'm giving it probably an A tier right now because what it does really well. I think it loses points for being a little inflexible. It can't do a lot of different things yet that I know of. Maybe we'll fix that. It has really good sustain. It's one of the few classes where I'm happy to have some dots on it, especially if I have an ability to remove dots later. Like there's a number of items. Items make the Leper really interesting too. You can do things like, we haven't talked about this much in the other videos, but the items make the builds a lot more flexible. You can't use them regularly, but you do get a lot of incidental value on the Leper with some of the items, like a bleed cure item or the medicinal herbs that remove all dots. Those are both super valuable to have occasionally targeting the Leper because you can stack up a bunch of dots, trigger the big heal right here, and then remove all those dots that have become really kind of significantly large dots, which is kind of nice. You can sometimes remove blind tokens off this character, things like that. So you get some like nice incidental value out of the items that come along with the game now. Just super fun class. It's been good for me in terms of boss sustain too. It doesn't tend to do any damage for me though. So if you're in a DPS race, the Leper has not been good for me in DPS races. So somewhere around an A rank, probably a low A rank is how I'm looking at the Leper right now. Anyways, I know probably a lot of you were excited to hear what I had to say about the Leper, probably expecting me to be super negative on the class, but I think this class is a lot better in Darkest Dungeon 2 with the tools it has than it was in Darkest Dungeon 1. And I don't think it's the weakest class anymore. I actually think it's on the stronger end of the classes. So anyways, let me know what you think. Please, if you have built high damage Leper, consistent high damage Leper comps in this game, Darkest Dungeon 2, let me know what you're working with because I'm curious to what you have built with that and how you've enabled it. And I'm excited to see the videos with the Leper big numbers coming out of this. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you soon.